John, what's this all about?
What's planet Earth? What's the one event all about? Well, the one event is about creating an event that could be a collective event that everyone could consider that it's their event. And there are so many groups and organizations and agencies that are all playing their part in this attempt to raise consciousness or to, cause some kind of shift in the planetary paradigm about how we experience life. And there's Save the Kids, and there's Save the Forests, and there's a million different things that these different groups and organizations are working toward. And the one event is about what would happen if all those groups and organizations all focused on one event. Then there would be a far more powerful impact in terms of bringing them all into a focus, into a point, if you will, of focus. That by doing that, then we could shift the paradigm, because there's hundreds of millions, if not a billion people that are within these groups and organizations, websites, all these different foundations and philosophies that are all trying to improve life on Earth in their own distinctive way. And so what we're moving towards, as we move into this 2012 shift, is that it's moving from the individual to the collective. And so the one event is about taking the collective approach to causing the shift and to raising the consciousness. And when that takes place, everybody gets what they want. The animals get saved, the forest gets saved, because there's a completely different shift in how we experience life. And with that shift, then it's a natural flow that people are going to make the choices, make the decisions in their lives about creating a better world. And there is a focus point that they can use their own individual personal power, but it's part of a collective power which has far more impact.
How do you think people are living at the moment unaware of this?
Well, people are probably, for the most part, people are in a conditioned way of living, and that conditioned perception has come from the past. So we've inherited the past that says, well, this is impossible. You can't shift a paradigm because that's never happened before. And so this belief that it can't happen is basically just a conditioned state. And so, how I approach that is that, in the last 150 years, there's been tens of thousands of paradigm shifts. Things that were impossible, historically impossible, that became possible over the last 100 years. And so we're still, people today, the Orville writes.
Today, the Orville writes?
Today, the Orville writes, those who are building something new, there are still people even today that will come up to them and say, oh, that's impossible. And so that's a conditioned reality. All we have to do is look at the last 100 years and realize everything's possible. And given another 10 years or 100 years, it's going to be possible. Well, if it's possible in 10 years or 100 years, it's possible now. So how do we approach this in a way that says all things are possible? Because history has taught us that everything changes. And every new idea, every new concept, even though they are generally greeted with a certain amount of resistance, over time there's a breakthrough, and then people go, well, of course, that makes sense. So any kind of change is going to come up against the traditional way of viewing, and the traditional belief systems that are in place. And so that's what, again, this 2012 shift is about, is to create, the opportunity for a collective change, for a collective experience, so that we can begin to create a better life for all of us with the intelligence that we have come into. We have the technology, we have the intelligence to live in a much more dynamic, healthy way, more of a unified way, a more harmonic way. And so the question is, how do we approach that? How do we begin that? And that's what the one event is really about, and that is what the 2012 shift opportunity is about, is, hey, let's take advantage of it.
So, 2012, why should I be interested in this?
Why would anybody be interested in 2012? Well, it's like the millennium, in the 2000 millennium, 2 years, 3 years before it happened, not a lot of people were interested in it. It was too far out. 2012 is the same thing. Here we are midway through almost 2010. We're, 2 years and some months away from the 2012, the December 21st, 2012. And what's going to happen is that event is just going to be put more on the radar screen, more and more and more, as we come closer to it. And there's already a tremendous amount of interest. I mean, there was a movie about 2012, even though it was, Hollywood's way of doing it. But it's still putting that information out there. It's still putting that awareness out there. Why would you want to know about it? Well, because it's an opportunity to create a shift, because everybody on the planet is going to become aware of it over the next 2 years. And so how could you market something that the whole world would end up knowing about? It would almost be an impossibility. These things are placed here by nature, by life, for us to have as major turning points in human history.
All right. Well, that's our little intro. Who are you? Who's John Francis?
Who's John Francis? Well, I wish somebody else would answer that, but I'll give it a shot. Well, I'm just an ordinary person. I'm like anyone else. I have my beliefs, and I have my sense of what my purpose is. And I suppose the most impactful thing that's happened to me in my life, which has probably led me to this interest in shifting consciousness, is a sweat lodge that I went to 1988. And I was a businessman, and had a lot of financial changes, and had gotten a divorce a couple of years before that. My mom had died a couple of years before that. So it was kind of a time in my life where there was a lot of changes going on. And came across this opportunity to do a sweat lodge, which is a Native American ceremony. And so as a result of that experience, I had visions that I saw in this little sweat lodge hut. And the ceremony goes on for several hours. And I guess I was put into what people would call an altered state. And that's what the sweat lodge does. It brings the physical world and the spirit world together. And that's what they call that when people do have these kind of paranormal experiences. They call that dream time, where your conscious state is altered and you go into kind of a paranormal state or an altered state. And what happened to me in this particular case was spirit or, guidance came to me telepathically. And I saw these visions of the future that were kind of amazing and at the same time very frightening. That had to do with the earth changes, had to do with the kind of changes, catastrophic changes that were going to be happening on the earth, cataclysmic changes even. And from those experiences and what happened in terms of that process of being talked to telepathically, being in an altered state for about, must have lasted for about 30 minutes. It really impounded, I mean, it was very impactful in my life.